If I'm investing with you, it's because I believe in you. And I believe that whatever life throws at us, you'll sort it out.
Peter Horan, the executive. Throughout the 2000s, Peter was CEO of not one, but two of the most successful and iconic internet brands, About.com and Ask. Since then, he served as a member of the board of LendingTree before joining Answers as president and subsequently becoming a member of other companies' boards, including Topix. I always encourage young CEOs to write, and Peter is an example of the fruits of that labor, as he ended up sharing one of my earlier articles on TechCrunch, which listed down the greatest M&A deals of all time in digital media, and I think it caught his attention because the list named not only one, but two of the deals that he was involved with. Since then, a mutual friend connected us, and we've remained industry friends for years, becoming a great sounding board as advisor, executive, investor, and analyst.
We talk a lot about disruption. Things are definitely changing in media and editorial and advertising. What was the one thing you saw either at Ask or at About that explained the state of media today?
Well, I'd say the biggest thing I saw, and it was a trend that About leveraged, was the move to search. And so if you think about the kind of the evolution of the internet as we know it, well, first of all, there was just the toy phase. It was like, I can see the treasures of the Vatican archive. Wouldn't that be fun? It was like, that's cool, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's fun. Then you had AOL, which was the internet in a box. The dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, you've got mail. With the whole idea that people didn't really understand the internet or how to find stuff, and so they needed somebody to sort of spoon feed them the internet. And it was kind of clunky with the Rayman interface. The next phase was the directory businesses like Yahoo, transitional life forms. And still, it was consumers had a hard time finding content, media companies had a hard time finding audience, and they needed this intermediary. Where the whole business exploded was when you had Google come in and actually have functional search. Because suddenly, it's like you could say, hey, I'm looking for the recipe for a great fondue. And Google says, don't worry about it. I'm going to go out, I'm going to scour 60 billion documents, and in a hundredth of a millisecond, I'm going to give you all these answers. And what that changed was readers' relationship to content, because all of a sudden information is totally atomized. It changed sort of people's, how they think about stuff, because suddenly it's like this impulse question. Hey, who's this guy? He was in a movie before, but I don't know who it was. And so About was one of the first sites to totally say, hey, you know what, we're going all in. And people say, oh, you're a Google bitch. It's like, yes, I am. But it was, but we said, you know what, we believed that the world would be changed by search. And we said, okay, we're gonna treat SEO as a blood sport. A lot of media owners resisted the change. They said, no, okay, we'll throw some meta tags on, we'll call it good. And we'll say, we did SEO, pat ourselves on the back. About's like, no, you eat what you kill. We had guides who were compensated based on how much traffic they got. The only way they got traffic was by winning search. And so that was really like where we said, okay, we actually can take a business which in the midst of the nuclear winter of 2001, 2003 was struggling. And we sold it to the New York Times, God bless them, for $400 million in 2005. And it continued to grow in value and success because we sort of went with that tidal shift towards search. Now, what's happened since then, a question you didn't ask, is Google and the other big platforms are trying to take back that freedom. So in the early days, Google was an honest broker. They said, hey, you ask a question, I'm going to give you the best answer. And yeah, we'll figure out how to make money later on. But now what they've done is they've really gone to a system where all the real estate above the fold on the first page of the search results is Google real estate. And somewhere they monetize it. It's a Google product listing ad or something like that. And so it's getting harder now, like my rule of thumb, the first organic search listing, free search listing, gets about 50% of the traffic it got 3 years ago. So it's, and the same thing with Facebook. Facebook said, oh, we love your publishers, please put your content on here. Build up your list of subscribers and you can reach your friends. And then it's like, oh yeah, not so much. It's like if you want to reach those guys, we're going to charge you for that. Now, you only get 2% reach organically. And so it's shifting now where you're seeing kind of greater and greater consolidation of power and control in the hands of the platform companies.
So you talk about discovery and we've gone from search to social. So when you talk about social, it's Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg is always in the news since being an exec, you've become an investor and an advisor. Take us through the challenge and style when it comes to working with executives and ultimately, managing those egos and those personalities versus coaching and advising an entrepreneur as either as an investor or as an advisor.
So one of my constructs is that there are three types of people in business. There's starters, growers, and managers. And there's some people that are like really, really good at, I think it was the two guys in a Macintosh and a dog and cold pizza. I got an idea. And then there's other guys who are growers. I'm kind of a grower. I'll come in when there's sort of a business, but you want to get it to the next level. And then you sell it to a manager who are folks who are comfortable sitting in meetings about meetings and writing reports about reports. No. And so I'm coming back to your question. In business, with luck, growers don't tend to function, or starters don't tend to function well in bigger businesses. Like they just chafe at structure. They got their own schedule. They resemble somebody I know, but growers have got that entrepreneurial streak, but they sort of want to have more resources and maybe a little bit bigger stage. And so in that regard, they're kind of like a lot of entrepreneurs. And so the old command and control, IBM from the 50s structure doesn't work. Once upon a time, IBM stood for I've been moved. And they'd say, Ash, you need to go to Delhi, India today. And you just pack your family up, pack your bag up, and move to India. And if they said, oh, you know what, we're not doing that anymore, do this. You said, yes, sir, I'll do that. But increasingly, kind of in modern culture and in the better companies, there's a really strong similarity between successful managers and entrepreneurs. They want ownership. They have informed but relatively strong beliefs. And so to that extent, you can sort of reason with people, guide them, try to kind of aim them in the right direction. But if they don't buy in on their own, then you won't have any success. And so, and especially with an entrepreneur, it's their company. I mean, it's my money, but it's their company. And there's an old expression, it's like you bet on the jockey, not the horse. And it's that you say, okay, you know what? If I'm investing with you, it's because I believe in you. And I believe that whatever life throws at us, you'll sort it out. Because whatever business you think you're investing in at an early stage, it's not going to be that business when you're done. And so things happen. And you say, okay, you know what? I believe that Ash is smart and resilient and owns this business and cares about it. And so if I'm going to give advice, it's got to be sort of in the context of, hey, I saw something look like this, or have you thought about that? I am a friend and advisor to Rafat Ali at Skift. And Rafat is a successful executive. And so, when we talk about stuff, it's like, I don't tell Rafat what to do, but I say, I saw something look like this before. What do you think? And and he goes away, and somebody says yes, says no. He internalizes it, but that's the same thing I would do with, like I said, a good executive at a big company. If they're not a good company, you should get rid of them. But the folks that build businesses tend to be internally directed. Like they want to prove something. They want to do something on their own.
What is the one thing you wish, that you now know, that you wish you knew when you started your career as an executive? And then same question when you started your investing career.
As an executive, it's that you don't make money with a salary, you make money with equity. Because you have all the good jobs in the world, but you don't really get ahead until you get some piece of equity that goes up disproportionately. So it's like, especially kind of it's hard to save enough to really get ahead. So it's like, so I think I would have started looking for opportunities to find really good equity earlier in my career.
And as an investor, what have you learned now after all these investments?
I got scar. I'm head to toe scar tissue. It's like every time I go, okay, now that's the mistake I won't make next time. So one thing is what I just said. It's that whatever business you think you're investing in, it'll be something else before it's done, and that that'll probably take 3 or 4 pivots. Related to that, it's the notion that the company has to have enough money to have enough time to sort things out. Often an investor or an entrepreneur will show up to investors and say, all right, here's my business plan, and it's sort of priced for perfection. It's like, yeah, and this is going to happen, and on Thursday, we're going to do this, and on Saturday, we're going to do a Series A. And it's like, no, bad things will happen. Your co-founder will take off for a beach in Mexico. A competitor will announce a product. The economy will tank. Trump will declare a trade war. All sorts of bad stuff happens. And you just have to say, hey, you know what? That's real life. That will happen. And then I guess the other thing which I really come to believe is, and it's a line I'm stealing from Jim Lanzone, who worked for me at IAC and is now over at CBS, is I'd rather have a slice of a watermelon than a whole grape. And I'll see a lot of entrepreneurs.
What does that mean?
Doesn't it sound good though?
That's why I was like, I don't know what that means.
No, what it means is a lot of entrepreneurs will come and say, oh, hey, look, I've got this great, I'm going to sell cooking mitts to left-handed professional chefs, and I can dominate this market. It's like, great, you dominate that market and you sold 50 gloves. Or it's like, no, this is a huge multi-billion-dollar market. So when I'm coaching entrepreneurs on venture pitches, what I would say is there's a a good venture pitch is a 4-act play. And act 1 is, we've uncovered this immense opportunity, it's huge. Act 2 is, and we figured out how we're going to skin that cat. These are our approach. Act 3 is why you should believe that we're going to be the guys who will be successful. And then Act 4 is, and if we're successful, this business will be worth something. We're going public, somebody's going to buy us. But it always starts with this notion that there's this huge opportunity. It's like if there's not a huge opportunity, it's unlikely that I as an investor will get a venture return.
So a couple of questions. One is not so much about Barry Diller, but working for someone like Barry Diller when you're wearing the entrepreneur hats.
Yeah.
How do you manage somebody like that? Not him if you don't want to. You know what I mean? Because this is also about entrepreneurship.
Managing Barry Diller is like managing a thunderstorm. You don't manage it. You just
but manage the
around.
situation. You know what I mean? Is that it? Do you work around that?
No. What's interesting, and Barry is different. I worked for and with a number of, I'll say, eccentric billionaires. And Barry is different than a guy like a Pat McGovern or even a Michael Dell, in that Barry comes out of the studio business. And what I always have to write on my hand and look at is whenever Barry sounds the craziest, he's liable to be the smartest. I mean, you go back to, because it's all intuitive. In the 50 years ago, he started the movie of the week for ABC, and the first guy he hired was Steven Spielberg to direct Duel. It was like, huh. At a time when America was content with 3 networks, he started the 4th network, Fox. But what does he put on there? The Simpsons and Married with Children, a cartoon and a comedy about a dysfunctional family. And you go, oh no, that's crazy, you can't do that. But it was successful. In the early 2000s, when it was the nuclear winter, we were starving. It was like there was no daylight on the horizon. Everybody was running away from consumer internet. And all the VCs said, we swear to Christ we'll never again invest in a B2C ad-supported business. Barry went around and bought up City Search and Evite and all sorts of internet businesses and rode the return of the internet market well. So whenever...
And then e-commerce, which now everybody is chasing, he's got the ultimate...
Right. He was at HSN and QVC very early. And so part of what... And working with a personality like that, in a sense, is almost implementing his hunches and saying, hey, all right, so this is what he wants to do. How can you actually make that successful? You just have to respect that, sometimes, and by the way, this actually goes back to one of the things I wanted to talk about, was the sort of forgotten history of Silicon Valley, or the misreported history of Silicon Valley. Now technology, it's a big business. And so everybody wants to be able to fit the future into a spreadsheet. Say, no, here, we know this is going to be successful. It's going to look like this. And I was in Silicon Valley. I started working with technology products in the mid-'70s. The term Silicon Valley was only created in '73 by Don Heffler. So I was there in the early messy days. And for the first 10 years, everybody thought this was a stupid career move. It's like, oh, well, you should get something serious like banking or, consumer products advertising. And we said you're working with, so I wrote the owner's manual for Pong in 1975. I was on the floor of the second West Coast Computer Fair in San Jose in 1977 when Steve and Steve were selling apples off the floor. And you know, I was doing advertising for cell phones in the early 80s. And what was really interesting, actually, I think through the launch of Windows 3.1 and the Office in the early 90s, consumer research was worthless. Nobody, I mean, I've still got a focus group report I did for Commodore for the PET, Personal Electronic Translator, which was their early home computer in the late 70s. And people said, I do not need a personal computer. I cannot imagine what I would do to a personal computer. They did not want cell phones. They said, I'm just an ordinary person. I don't need a phone. In 1991, when we said, well, would you like to be able to see on the screen what's going to happen when you print it? Would you like your apps to work together? No, I don't need that. It's like WordPerfect and 123 don't work that way, so why would I need that? And so early on, it's like we said, well, I want to be able to model out how big an opportunity this is. It's like you couldn't put any numbers in a spreadsheet. I started in Santa Clara University in 1972, and it was still Santa Clara County was still an agricultural community. In the 50s and 60s, the dominant export from Santa Clara was prunes. I had 1/3 of the world's prune market was out of the Santa Clara Valley. And so he said, well, could anybody have foreseen this? No. So the one piece that sort of gets lost is the willingness to take an unsupported risk.
To that point, do you think the desire to go and become an entrepreneur instead of, say, a banker, a lawyer, is it driven more by the lifestyle and the freedom or the brave new world aspect of it, or is it really more the money, the fact that you can make all this wealth?
Great entrepreneurs tend to have a chip on their shoulder.
Insecurity.
But it's they've got a notion, they want to prove something. A gal that I've co-invested with a few times talks about the eye of the tiger. And she says, we talk about kind of all the challenges any entrepreneur faces and the obstacles you got to overcome. And she says, you know what, if they don't have that sort of hunger, it's like one of the early investment banks was Hambrecht and Quist. And I was talking to one of the names on the door, and he said, I want to make sure that anybody I invest with has already maxed out their credit cards, mortgaged their house, tapped out the bank accounts. He says, because I want them to know that their life will be a smoking hole in the ground if they fail. Because it will get hard, and a rational person will want to run for the door. And I want them to understand they don't have that option.
That's me, 2006, 2013. So Uber, with the IPO, as well as the challenges of Vice and BuzzFeed, they recruited a lot of employees based on this promise of options that are going to be worth a lot, not just in the money, but millions and millions. And what we've seen is that's not going to necessarily be the case. A lot of these options are underwater. What do you think that does to the psychology of recruiting, hiring, retaining, and compensating talent, whether it's a tech or these new media companies, with that reality that's setting in?
Well, I think it goes back to one of my core premises, which is investors and operators act like this is a riskless business. It's like in the early days, like, no, we got it. It's like this was, you're doing Lewis and Clark. You're starting out from St. Louis and hoping to get to the Pacific, but you don't know how many rivers there are, how many mountains, how many Indians. It's like you just hope for the best. And so, it's like the true spirit of Silicon Valley was that willingness to jump off a cliff and trust that you know how to fly before you hit the ground. And now everybody wants to believe, oh no, I'm going to join Uber and I'll be a millionaire because it's Uber. In fact, the other game that's been played, sometimes with success, sometimes without, is that venture capitalists have figured out that they don't actually have to build sustainable businesses. They only have to build businesses that they can IPO. Or sell. But increasingly, the acquisition of uneconomic businesses has gone away. And even the sort of strategic investment, you saw Disney write down $400 million of investment this week in Vice, because it was like, they thought it was sort of, we can do this on a small scale and we'll kind of trust that it'll be worth something but then it was like, actually, this thing isn't making money.
I think that's also because TPG has certain liquidation preferences where Disney just said the only company that'll make money is TPG,
Right.
so why carry this? But
Right.
the point you're making is valid.
Yeah. No, it's that Uber is still losing money on every ride.
Do you think Uber is Pets or is it Amazon? Pets.com or Amazon? Or what those represent, not specifically.
No. That is the bet. You know, what I always say, it's like Hunter Walk posted something about the 15th anniversary of Google going public, or something like that. And it was like, and when they went public, Google didn't really have a business model. But then they figured out AdSense, and they bought DoubleClick, and they bought YouTube, and ta-da! They're actually a rationally priced, very profitable business.
Well, AdSense was already around. They were very profitable because I think AdSense has been, you know, they kind of inspired themselves from GoTo Overture's model. They bought Sprinks, but they weren't as dominant as they are now.
AdSense, I was one of the first, in fact, go back in the 10th anniversary of AdSense, I was because I was like one of the early AdSense customers. AdSense really was implemented in 2004, coincident with them going public. So it really.
You're right. AdWords existed.
Yeah, but it really was like, but it was very early, and I don't think you could project from Google in 2004 to
That's right.
Alphabet.
No, there's a big disconnect.
Yeah, and so that becomes the question of, but the real question about Uber is, can they ever get the economics of the core business right? And I'm skeptical. So I think, in fact, they could be, again, a transitional life form where they sort of create the notion of a sharing economy, but they're not the ones that actually survive to win.
So I was hearing Michael Milken speak last week, and he said something like there's 7 billion phones out there, mobile phones out there, and there's 7-8 billion people. So, I mean, does that mean that the mobile market is mature, and are these new businesses basically going to be valued like these traditional businesses? And the main question is, what does that mean in terms of opportunities in the future? If you're an entrepreneur or investor listening, what should we be looking for?
Well, I think that's a great servable market for services providers, app providers. You know, if you think about all of the functions that are now conflated into a mobile phone, it's like, you know, I was setting up a trainer for my bike, and it's like the operating assumption is, well, I'm going to connect this via Bluetooth to my phone, and I'll have an app here that'll be my dashboard for the bike trainer. And it's well, no. So now you start to say, well, hang on, we're starting with this premise that that everybody's got a relatively smart device, that device is addressable both Wi-Fi, cellular, Bluetooth. It's getting smarter and smarter, more powerful. You know, the cliche but true is that your iPhone is more powerful than the computer that sent the Apollo 11 to the moon. It's like, so everybody carries it around in their pocket. So yeah, I don't know what that means for Apple and the device manufacturers, because I think we're all kind of increasingly, you know, having it seem it's harder and harder. Why should I upgrade? It's like the screen is really good, it's really powerful. But in terms of the functionality, I think we're only really starting to tap what these phones can do.
What are your thoughts on, you know, now everybody is kind of expecting the Facebooks and the Googles to save news, and then you're hearing about journalism, and then you're hearing that they're too big and you need to break them up. Do you think that's BS, just, you know, making noise around the theme of the day? Or do you think that ultimately, you know, both they have a responsibility to support journalism and they're too big, they need to kind of be teared apart?
There are a couple of different thoughts in there. I have recently invested in local news startup because I believe local news is important. I don't believe Google or Facebook has any responsibility to save local news. But I do think that the market will evolve. You know, with traditional newspapers, and to some extent we have local TV stations because once upon a time we needed to have a broadcast tower. And the range of that tower defined a market. You know, there was an implied geographic franchise for newspapers, for TV stations, for radio stations that is largely irrelevant in the modern age. Now people have the ability to, you talked earlier about search, but people have the ability to select their news sources, either because it's aligned with their interests or aligned with their political views. And so to some extent, there will be there will be destruction, and it'll be messy. But what will be destroyed, in a sense, is a lot of really bad newspapers that really have no reason to exist. But people will say, oh, I want something. And then entrepreneurs will step up and say, oh, I can fill that gap. The market wants this type of news coverage. Let me, and by the way, so for example, in Portland, Oregon, where we live, the #1 radio station is Oregon Public Broadcasting. And people have said, all right, well, look, we'll kick in to support OPB because they're giving us a quality product that is interesting, that is informative, that is entertaining, and that's economically stable and successful.
So speaking of consumers paying for content, I mean, you see YouTube, their vision of the future is everything is ad supported.
Yep.
Then you see Netflix, dominant, their future of the world is largely subscription based. Is there room for both, or is one going to be the dominant? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, room for both. Again, a lot of folks have gone to an ad-supported model because it was kind of lazy. And I think what most publishers are starting to realize is that, Terry just showed that 80% of the internet ad market is going to programmatic. The number of RFPs, premium programs, is going way down, and they're only going to the most prestigious media publications. I think readers are going to have to pay for content, and publishers are going to have to create product that is worth a reader paying for it. Most publishers have thought of paywalls and paid content as being a marketing problem. I got to get people to pay for what I'm doing. And what they've really got is a product problem. They've actually got to kind of look at themselves naked in the mirror and say, okay, what can I do that a reader will find sufficiently valuable that they'll go into their pocket and pay for? The other reason why people pay is particularly younger Gen Z millennial readers will pay for content that they feel aligns with their values, serves a social purpose, and it's like, yeah, I want this content. This company is doing important work, and I want to support that.
To that point, do you think right now, and it's unfair to lump millennials all together, do you feel like millennials are like this because at this age, when you're young, you have very idealistic, thoughts, and then as you get older, you get married, you got a mortgage, you got a job, you kind of become a bit more cynical. Is this group always going to care about corporate social responsibility, sustainability, things like that, or no, this is a fad, they'll get older and they won't care?
No, I think the habits that you create when you're young stay with you. That was for a while, that was the myth that newspapers believed in. Oh, when they get older, they'll get out of this internet phase and they'll like buy a house and subscribe to a newspaper. And it was like, no, not so much. I'm a baby boomer. My generation was like, live fast, die young, leave a beautiful corpse. Well, now we're old. But we're not going to, we don't have a concept of being sedentary like our parents would have. So I actually believe that the sort of the belief systems and the habits you create when you're younger tend to stay with you, and stubbornly refuse to change.
So a couple years ago, your son went to school to Oregon, and you guys decided to pack up and move.
No,
that wasn't what happened.
Pam, my wife's mom, has lived in Oregon for 30 years, and she was getting older and needed sort of more attention. And so that's why we packed up and moved.
So that's a big lifestyle change for someone like you who's well connected. Would you view that as like it's an opportunity to get out of the echo chamber? Or are you like, okay, this is going to take a little bit of adjustment, like I get the bigger picture. How do you approach that? I always talk about balancing work, life, and play. And it's probably the right decision to make, but there does come a spillover and a trade-off. So tell us a little bit about that conversation and that thinking.
Where this transition is most acute is folks that have had like big corporate jobs. And you're the chief digital officer of XYZ company. And and people show up on your doorstep and say, oh, can I talk to you? You're invited to a conference. Would you please speak? Would you, they quote you. And people always assume it's them they're talking. No, they're talking to the job. And when you go out of that, so you lose some of that because you don't have that platform anymore. You move to a corner of the country or a corner of another country. it's like suddenly the burden of proof is on you to say, no, I haven't died, I haven't retired. No. So I say, okay, I've got to provide proof of life. I've got to show up places. I've got to get on an airplane, come to New York. I've got to write articles. I've got to give speeches. I've got to, go stand at CES at the top of the escalator outside of Shelley Palmer's talk and shake hands. Because otherwise, everybody moves on with their life, and you sort of slip out of consciousness. And so I think I was talking to a friend yesterday about sort of as individuals, we talk about building your brand, which is kind of BS in a lot of ways, but like I sort of very consciously construct like my LinkedIn network, my Twitter network, Facebook to some extent, and I sort of program them. And I'll say, okay, hey, I'm giving a panel on identity at the LUMA conference, and I post a picture. Then I'll write an article about that. Then I'll tweet about it. Or but the burden is on me to remain relevant and part of the conversation.
What's the single biggest mistake, in your opinion, that investors make when they're looking for entrepreneurs, and that entrepreneurs make when they're trying to raise capital?
Investing in an incomplete team. They'll say, oh, no problem. As soon as I raise money, I'll hire a CTO. Or you say, you know what, this guy isn't really a good long-term CEO, but we'll get a good CEO in the future. And it's like, that almost never works out. Biggest mistake entrepreneurs make is they don't understand their own cap table. I've gone through a lot of classes to explain it. Here's how preferences work. Here's, and it's just shocking the number. And I'll always say, it's like, look, you should always have your waterfall in your head of, hey, if I take this money and we sell it for $20 million, what do I get? And they don't actually understand how their own cap table works, which is just really sad.